Kim Toomey. I'm a solution consultant with RelTO, and I'm joined today by Heather Tweedy from Republic Services. And we are going to talk to you today about how Republic Services has tapped the power of flexible MDM for an adaptable data architecture. Heather, would you mind giving us a little bit of background information on your business model and the intricacies around the customer concept, specifically for Republic Services? I know you do so much more than just, the big trucks that come pick up our garbage cans from our house.
Yeah. So Republic Services, we kind of joke we're like the Fortune 300 company least known in the world, unless you happen to be our customer. But we are a environmental solutions company, which means we do everything from picking up the trash at households all the way up to hazardous remediation. So think like the Ohio train derailment. We're the people that are getting all of that off the ground and then safely stored somewhere else until it becomes inert. A big thing that means for us is that we have a very, very wide range of customer types. So we have very, very simple, one person, one home, all the way up to multi-organization, incredibly complex businesses. The other thing that's been kind of interesting is like a lot of, if you're a utility or a freight or manufacturing kind of company, you were probably very operationally driven to start, and so you didn't really think or worry about your customer a lot. You're like, hey, if I can bill someone and I can pick up the trash, then we're good. But in 2021, we had a massive shift. We got a new CEO, and he basically said, hey, we're going to become a world-class Starbucks-style customer experience organization, and we're going to do it by 2030. So you guys should probably go figure out customer and what the heck that looks like, and what data underpins that. So that's really what kind of started us on our journey. We did go ahead and set some kind of big goals. So the first one was, again, we didn't really think about the people that we did business with. So we had really, really bad data, which meant creating any sort of MDM for them, merging their profiles across 8 different systems can be really hard. So we said, hey, we need to actually have complete data on these people within the year. That was a massive shift for us. We also said, hey, we need an enterprise definition of customer. We did everything on the bill. So we said, hey, if there's an invoice, that's an account, and we don't need to think bigger than that. But we went ahead and bought about $3 billion worth of new companies that were far kind of ahead of us in terms of that customer experience, and so we needed to find a way to actually rationalize that and say our accounts actually ladder up to these customers and these very broad people across this $10 billion of acquired companies over the last several years actually are these customers. And yeah, so that's really kind of where we started and the challenge that we had.
Awesome, thank you. So Heather, one of the things I remember when I first started working with Republic Services and yourself was how thoughtful of an organization you had been in coming up with this customer zeal concept and really thinking through business outcomes. So what are those business outcomes that Republic Services is hoping to achieve by having that holistic view of customers and all of their relationships?
Yeah, I'll say we have to give a lot of credit to our executives. They really kind of came to us when we were talking about data and said it all has to have a business use. They didn't really use the term use case because they wanted us to think very broadly, but everything has to actually have a business value behind it. So for us, we really aligned around what we call customer zeal, which is us having zeal for the customer. Nobody's got zeal for their trash company. But it was to improve the customer experience by increasing the amount that people could do on self-service, because again, nobody really wants to think about their trash. And then also drive revenue growth. So the $3 billion of companies that we acquired kind of turned us from a part of the trash and environmental solutions chain to a complete turnkey company. So there was a tremendous amount of ability to grow, and I can say this because we said it to the street. We said, hey, we're going to grow $100 million worth of cross-sell, upsell revenue within 3 years, which means you really have to be able to know what you sell to your current customers, what you are selling to the people that you just acquired, and where they can use the products that you have that you aren't selling to them yet. That's really what we had to do. So very short order, we had to figure out who they were, where they shared, what those products and services were. So we weren't telling somebody, hey, you're a gas station, we can take care of your like dumpster trash too. And they're like, yeah, you already do that, right? Because we didn't have the visibility between the two. So that was huge for us. We actually are already over our $100 million goal. So now they've set new goals that are not public yet, but are far more aggressive and are making data even more important. And then the last one was we had to improve our overall efficiencies. I know we'll talk about it a little bit more, but there was definitely in previous projects, we'd already done product MDM, we had done a knowledge management, and you would go in a room for 3 years, you'd come back out with this product, and then nobody really wanted it anymore because it fit what they were doing 3 years ago, and nobody really knew how to integrate it. And because you were gone for 3 years, people were like, this project's never ending, and the reputation would really, really get hurt, and so then adoption got hurt. So we were challenged to just kind of every few months be able to deliver something that the company could actually use and believe in.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. So with this new approach, what did you want to achieve by delivering that value quickly for the business and show some of those initial first wins at Republic?
Yeah, so the first thing we did is we did say that, hey, we're going to do it in what we at Republic call slices. So we actually took people first because, and we always say this is either the most genius thing we did or the dumbest thing we did, but we said, hey, this is the absolute worst data we have in the company. Let's go target that, figure out how to clean it up, and then let's go ahead and get what we called one version of Joe. So we had 7 different systems that wrote contact data. They all had different data models. We'll give a lot of credit to Reltio because they were able to help us kind of quickly figure out what that data model should look like. We mapped everything in to say, all right, a email on an account in our billing system that has no sense of person is going to go ahead and transfer over here to this kind of contact. It's got a billing relationship. And that's what we started with. And then kind of over to the change management piece, we went to our executives and said, hey, we have about 800,000 people who don't have a complete contact. We'd like to make it part of our 2,500 salesperson's job to go and get that information, and we'd like to do it in a year. And they bought in. So we had SVPs that went out with us into the field to say, look, this is part of your job now, and this is going to be a year that's really painful, and you're going to spend 30 minutes of your day not selling. You're going to go, you're going to call your customers, and you're going to get that complete contact so that we actually have someone to call when there's a block stop. We have someone to call if there's a billing issue. We can email them. We can kind of get to them however their channel of choice is. So that was massive buy-in. They're about 80% of the way to their goal right now, and we've got 3 more months, so we're feeling really good about it. And then the last piece that we found really, really important was what we called having someone to catch the data. So we basically said, hey, we're only going to prioritize use cases or products for our data if there is somebody out in the business who already has committed their dollars to catch the data and to use it. So for example, our sales team said, absolutely, we'll go ahead, we'll clean this data up for you, we'll commit to it. We had a marketing team that said, hey, we have this automated customer notification program, so we will go ahead and commit to moving over to your data. That way we've got one clean version. They were able to significantly increase what we call the contactability rates. We went from being able to accurately contact like 40% of our customers when there was a massive delay to now we contact closer to 80%. So we're able to show value really quickly. Same thing with the cross-sell. They committed to putting dollars behind a dashboard so they could actually start tracking the leads. And then using our data to say, hey, we're going to build these strategic account-based marketing programs. So every single time we do a data project, somebody out there's catching it so that it builds that reputation, and then we get better buy-in for things like data quality and governance and the unsexy stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. You've gone through so many different data projects over the years. One of the debates that many companies have is, do we go homegrown? Do we buy? How do we string this together? So what are some of the lessons that you've learned from the journey with your legacy MDM solution and your homegrown solution that really helped shape your overall MDM evaluation? And were there any specific requirements that you were looking for in that process?
Yeah, when I joined the data team, we were about a year into building from scratch a customer MDM, which meant that when I joined, every single decision was being made from scratch. So, hey, how are we going to go ahead and say that these two records are actually the same contact, right? So we then had to go and make all those decisions by hands, and then somebody was going and coding it by hand, and it was all very kind of black box to us on the business side because we couldn't really see it, and they were going to build a UI later for us to see it. And we were, a year into a project that we thought would take us 2 years, which already felt insanely long, and we were behind. And we really just kind of stopped, paused. A group of us were able to say, hey, this isn't working. I give a ton of credit. Our data architect and director of data for the IT side both came and were like, hey, we want to rip this piece of technology out because it's never going to work, it's never going to scale. You guys have this massive roadmap, and it turns out we can't get there. And we want to replace it with something else. And to their credit, we were able to go to the executives and say the same thing. Hey, the millions of dollars you guys just spent doing this thing that was incredibly custom because we convinced ourselves that we were very special snowflakes and we were going to need something incredibly custom. We're going to rip it out. We're going to be 8 months behind on everything that we promised you we could do. And we're going to go find a new piece of technology. And we did not know what that looked like at the time. We hadn't really looked around a lot. We'd done product MDM with Informatica. It was very rigid. We knew we couldn't do that this time because if we were going to do fast delivery, we were going to make mistakes, and we were going to have to go back and say, hey, we kind of got it wrong. We've done that a lot with our customer. We're starting with what we say is false negatives are better than false positives to us. So as we're going through over 12 million customers that we know we're going to get from these 15 million accounts, we said we're going to take this set of attributes that we think are smart to merge, and we give credit. Reltio's merge system has allowed us to test that a lot. But we'd rather have 2 customers that turns out should have been 1, just staying as 2 for now, when we can go ahead and merge them later. So the flexibility that Reltio had was incredibly important to us for that. There were a lot of other systems that said, nope, once you merge these records, that's it. Or once you have them out in the world, to merge them later is going to cause every single downstream system to have a problem. And we really couldn't do that. We know we're going to be wrong. We're kind of a fail fast, break things quick, fix them quick kind of company. So when we were looking, that was the number one. The other thing is that we're a trash company. We're not a tech company. And we didn't want to have to become one. So we wanted a system that had a lot of guidance to it. And so we'll give a lot of credit to Reltio Professional Services, but also just kind of the velocity packs and a lot of the pre-built rules for person matching. We used almost exclusively pre-built rules, and it worked out really well for us. From the time that we said, hey, we're going to rip all this stuff out, to the time that we went live, integrating data into 4 different systems, all in prod, all in real time, was 7 months. So that was a huge thing for us. And the difference between homegrown and us sitting around and arguing desperately over the smallest decisions to saying, let's just test out what comes out of the box. And if it doesn't work, we'll go fix it. But a lot of out of the box worked for us.
That's great. We love to talk about our flexibility at Reltio, so I love when customers are really utilizing that and taking advantage of all of those different capabilities. Sorry. Sorry. There we go. This one. I think we talked about those questions, though.
I think I
Yeah.
kind of know the slides, so
Sorry.
we can
Go ahead.
talk about
Yeah.
some of the things that we didn't maybe do quite as well, because I think we've gone through a lot of what worked really, really well for us. The first one is, and I kind of touched on it earlier, we're either geniuses or idiots, depending on the day that we feel like, but we actually did start with our worst data sets. They were also in, like we said, 4 different data models around the company, and we said the only way to drive value from this merging of people is to be able to go live, integrating into all 4 of those systems on the exact same weekend, because all of those systems were taking in live data every single day, and the second it got out of sync again, we were going to have the exact same problems. So we actually did then have to go through, we built the entire contact model within Reltio. We then had to map back exactly where that was going to go. Our billing system, like we said, had no sense of person. So in the billing system, if you had or were the person for, let's say, 15 accounts overseeing 30 sites, that meant you were in the system 45 times from the billing perspective. So when it went into Reltio, it basically would go in as 45 separate crosswalks, get shrunk down, go to Salesforce as now one clean person that sales could look at and see, oh, they oversee these 45 accounts and sites, which was huge for them because the first time that we built the connector between our billing system and Salesforce in 2016, we just duplicated the billing system. So they had 45 versions, and if they wanted to go update that person or that person left and someone new came in, they went and updated it 45 times, which meant they never updated that data because they weren't going to. So when we actually went live, we were still taking in those 45. A billing coordinator could still be updating any of those. That all had to still sync into Reltio, accurately sync over to Salesforce. And then when Salesforce made the update, it came back in and then actively updated 45 accounts and sites in the billing system. Plus, we also had our online customer portal that customers are in an odd amount of time, but they're able to go ahead and update service locations too. And we actually put out a massive campaign to get them to do that. So everything had to work at once, and that's what we decided to start with first. But on the plus side, I would say everything else feels very easy now. And so everything else just feels, and our team feels very easy. I've got my senior engineer in the room. Hopefully he feels that way too. But any other challenge that we have is very manageable now. The next one is implementation partner. So we definitely did struggle a bit. I would say really vet your implementation partner for how much guidance they're going to give you. Again, we wanted someone who would really, really hold our hand and also kind of help us with the Reltio system. Especially, there are a few places where, Kim and I have talked about this, where maybe they're not quite as mature. We really use the Salesforce connector a lot. We customize our Salesforce heavily. And if you're customizing your Salesforce that much, the connector can maybe, it's really built for those who are using Salesforce kind of out of the box. And I think we didn't necessarily have as much line of sight to that as we would have liked. And now we're using Reltio Professional Services, and we're very happy with that. We built up a lot of practice in-house as well, and I think that's been really important for us because then we understand the tool. We kind of use Reltio to tell us, hey, here's what it can and can't do as backup dev as well. So when we're just trying to really hit certain timelines, we're able to kind of scale up, scale down. And then the last one was Republic's. Within the building, we have a bit of a internal reputation for taking really, really great technology and then deciding that we are so special that we have to rip it apart and customize it to no end. And then, 2 years later, your executives are like, why is this thing not doing the amazing thing that the technology promised? And people would be like, I don't know. Like, it's just supposed to be working. And so with the customer data project, we said, you know what, anytime that something out of the box isn't going to work for us, let's pause and let's ask ourselves, are we really that special? or are we just not doing it the right way? Should our business process change? Because companies like Reltio, like Salesforce, they're talking to hundreds of companies. They are sitting there. Their whole job is to figure out, how do you create the best way of doing like MDM? And so we actually sat back and said, you know what? There's some of our business processes that should be fixed instead. We're going to go ahead and start forcing better address cleanup, or we actually are going to start consolidating certain data entry points so that only a small handful of people can put that information in, because we don't really trust the 3,000 people that are putting it in right now. And frankly, that's never going to be a priority in their job. So we tried as much as possible to say, could the business process be better before we decided to customize? And I think that's really helped as well and kind of sped up. And there are times that we say, yes, we actually do have to customize. Trash is funky. It's a little different. I think a great example of that is we said, you know what, our B2C is not a person, it's a home. If you move out of your home, there's a ton of different regulations your next city's going to have that's going to impact your willingness to pay, and what you can do and how sustainable you have to think. So we said it's the home instead, and that was a big change for us and a little different. But we always try to balance those two things.
So Heather, with some of the lessons that you've learned with your first slice and getting your feet wet with Reltio, what does the future of data look like? If you can share a little bit about, what's next at Republic, what are you trying to tackle, any of those things?
Yeah, so once we get this actual sense of customer ID, our next big thing is going to actually really start being the customer 360. I personally don't love that term, but it's stayed very popular. And so we're really looking at Reltio for how you guys can handle our transactional history data. We do over 12 million service and support cases every single year. We do a ton of e-commerce. We have 3 different channels for sales, a couple different CRMs. So being able to bring all of that data in and then allow people to start kind of peeling that off. We've built up a very robust analytics and AI practice, which we actually have a data team, and then we have an analytics and data scientist team, which I kind of like. Because we get to really, really focus on building the absolute best possible data, and then that team really focuses on, hey, how are we going to productize this? And then, of course, we work very hand in hand. But I think it lets my team stay very, very focused on, all right, here are the business outcomes that happen, here's what the analytics team wants, and then here's how we're going to make the absolute best data and data processes in this company, which is another interesting thing because we actually own the process entry piece.
Thank you for sharing that, Heather. And with that, I think we are just about at time, but we do have a few minutes for some questions.
Hi, Heather, and good to hear about your story about the waste industry. But I've seen earlier in the Velocity Pack, do Reltio provide the Velocity Packs for the waste industry?
So I can shed a little light on this. Republic actually got started with, I believe, our B2B Velocity Pack. So it's not hyper specific to the waste management, but how do we serve our B2B customers?
Yep, so there was a lot there in terms of separating out the idea of organization and customer. Enrichment was a big piece as well that we've been able to take advantage of.
Okay. Maybe one other question, sorry. So you said that there is a lot of keying in the data entry, right, for the customer locations, service locations. You may be serving like 50 to 60 million contacts, like homes, in a given week. So if all this cleansing is happening manually, or do you have some automated way to correct the service locations?
So it depends. A lot of the contact data either happens because we've done pretty aggressive campaigns to get customers to give it to us, or it does have to happen manually. We have looked at buying data for people's phone and email. It's not great right now. Other pieces we do automatically. So address cleansing comes, actually Reltio, I believe, just started using the same product that we use for addresses, so that was awesome. So now they are address cleanser. There's a lot of third-party enrichment that we do as well, including like Dun & Bradstreet, that we've actually been able to use Reltio's kind of built-in integration to really speed that up. It took like 3 sprints.
Heather, you briefly touched that you have extensively used the Salesforce connector. So if you can elaborate a bit, like the struggles you might have faced, because the Salesforce implementation at your side was much customized, as you mentioned, right? And the another question based on that is that in your roadmap, are you thinking to, are your organization thinking to move from connector to the integration hub to ease out those issues?
Yeah, and we've actually kind of started that. So we use the Salesforce account pretty out of the box. So we still use the Salesforce connector to send some of that information back and forth. But we did actually end up using the Reltio Integration Hub for our service locations, which is a custom object for us in Salesforce. And so we went ahead and built that one. I will say that the connector, again, it works better if you don't move Salesforce around a lot, but what we have found is we would love it if it was a little less of a black box so that we can kind of get in there and check and see what's happening. I think that's been one of our struggles, because if, the sync goes down at all, it's much harder to kind of understand, like, all right, what's happening in there. We do really like the integration hub. It does give us a little bit more control. It takes a little bit more development, but it seems to be working out.
Great. Any last questions?
Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.